Hi, everybody. Welcome to Life Stories Podcast, People Helping People. I'm Shara Goswick, your host. Today on the podcast, I chat with Amy Longmoore, who founded a nonprofit called Unmask the Invisible. Several years ago, one of Amy's children had a traumatic brain injury, and through their journey, she realized there were so many people that were suffering without the help that they needed, without the encouragement that they needed, without the resources and guidance that they needed. And she and her daughter, who is now healed, wanted to help as much as they could. So they started this nonprofit. They are full of resources and information, and I think you're going to find this story very encouraging. I ask you to check out their website after you listen and see if there's a way that you can help, or maybe you can even encourage someone you know that needs this help to reach out to them. Thanks for being here. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm good. So tell me about your nonprofit that you started, Unmask the Invisible. Why did you want to start this?
Sure. So on July 8th, 2020, our middle daughter, who is also a twin, was 17 at the time, and she fell victim to a car crash that left her with a severe traumatic brain injury, among several other injuries, such as midbrain stroke, collapsed lungs.
Wow.
She was put into a medically induced coma and was given a 1% chance of survival. And after that, we basically were told about a week into her being put into a coma, that my husband and I were called into a room. It was July 14th, and it was a Tuesday night. And the pediatric doctors basically called us and told us that have a priest or whatever our ritual was for her passing, to prepare for it, because she was not going to survive the night with all the damage
Wow.
that was done to her body and her brain. And there was a very, very high risk surgery to remove part of her skull that
Mm.
was not considered at that moment in time, because the risk was just that it favored that she would pass away during the
Wow.
surgery. So my husband and I, being very, very strong people of faith,
Hmm.
my husband looked at the pediatric group of doctors and basically said, "You do your job to the best of your ability, and we're leaving the rest to God." And we
Wow.
walked out of the room, and we had been praying ever since, we found out that she was in this horrific car crash. But our prayers intensified. And that night, I started a Facebook group called Miracle for Sierra, God's Heroes Unite, which almost 5 years later still garners following, and still make
Wow.
posts and keep people updated on, and Sierra keeps people updated on her progress. Um, so that morning, there happened to be a neurosurgeon that was rarely ever assigned to the pediatric unit, and he happened to be assigned to the unit that morning, and he overrode the pediatric doctor's call not to do the surgery. And at 4 o'clock on July 15th, 4 in the morning, they came in and they woke us up and said, "We are taking her down. We're doing this
Wow.
surgery. We can't waste any time." So of course, we had to sign a bunch of waivers. It was a very emotional, um,
I can
anguishing moment
imagine.
in our life,
Yeah.
for what we had been experienced the past week. And they rushed her down, and the surgery was successful. So they took out, if you picture a cantaloupe cut into fours, they took out the frontal lobe of her, or I'm sorry, the frontal piece of her skull.
Yeah.
And that became one of the life-saving aspects of what happened to her. So I firmly believe that God puts people in the right places at the right time, and he certainly did with this particular neurosurgeon. Sierra was still in a coma, and after day, the different medical teams would come in, whether it was respiratory or it was neurology, and they would try to get her to react and show some type of life, but she still
Yeah.
wasn't. All of the monitors and just her vital signs were just not showing any progress. And about a couple weeks into it, she started showing a little bit of movement. So they had to take her off of all of her IV medications that were keeping her sedated in the coma. And It was really just, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Based on the damage that they assessed, they said even if she survives, even if she recovers, she will not have any quality of life, and that she might be able to do very minimal hygiene things, if that. So we just kept praying, and our prayers became very intentional,
Yeah.
along with people all over the world whose support we garnered in prayer. And we started praying for very intentional things. So if it was her blood pressure was elevated, we would pray that God would regulate that. Um, and we would ask people to pray for these very intentional things with us.
Yeah.
um, as she was taken off of the IV medication and eventually transferred into oral medication, she began to show a little bit of movement, but she was still hooked up to a trach and feeding tube, among other things. And as she was being weaned off the medication, she started what's called storming. So, if you know anybody with a traumatic brain injury and the severity of it, when they start, their brain doesn't really know how to react. And when they're taken off the medication, they go through something called storming, where their body actually has seizures, and
Mm.
they're pretty uncontrollable. And you can't really control them with medication because
Yeah.
you would be counteracting what you're trying to do, taking her off the
Right.
medication. Um, it was hard to stabilize her vitals. They would use items such as an Arctic blanket, which was like an ice blanket they would put over her because her temperature would rise
Wow.
to really dangerous levels. And so this was a very, very tumultuous time in our life.
Yeah.
The day of her injury, we were actually leaving for a family vacation in Old Orchard Beach, Maine.
Mm.
And we had, all gone to our respective jobs that morning, except my husband was home. He started his vacation. So he was the initial person to find out. Going back to her story, however, as the prayers started working and Sierra was showing signs of life, um, again, we were just really amazed at the level of what the doctors, said that she would be capable of doing. We met with hospice and palliative care and so
Wow.
many, just so many entities of the hospital that really, I don't know, didn't believe, didn't have the faith, lacked the hope.
Right.
Um, but we never stopped. We never gave up on the miracle that we knew God was going to deliver to us. Eventually, Sierra moved to a step down unit, still having her trach and her feeding tube. She was transferred to Spalding Rehabilitation Hospital in Boston
Hmm.
in August, and she was in a vegetative state. And that too was a very tumultuous time because
Yeah.
they usually do not accept pediatric cases where people are still on a ventilator and are
Yeah.
minimally conscious. So we really fought to get her there. Once she was there, we were looking at probably a 6 or 7 month stay, and
Wow.
it was tough.
Yeah.
But that's not how the story turned out. So
That's right.
um, she had very intense therapies there, physical and soon to be speech and occupational. But the physical therapy, I can remember like yesterday going into the room and they would put her on what's called a tilt table and they would try to raise her up. And every
Yeah.
time they would try to raise her because her body has been in one position and muscles had atrophied and blood wasn't
Hmm.
flowing like it would be if we're upright. Her blood pressure would rise and they'd put her down
Oh,
and say, okay, we'll try again tomorrow. And this went on for like 3 weeks.
wow.
And I thought, this is going to be a long road, a long, long
Yeah.
road to recovery. But it seemed as if God really, God heard our prayers and progress started to come little by little. And the things we would intentionally pray for and ask others to pray for came to fruition. And before you knew it, she was taking her first initial steps.
Wow.
And right from there, she went to a walker, to assisted walking, to walking on her own. Um, and we knew this was all the hand of God.
Yeah.
Um, she came home from Spalding in October and has gone through really intensive outpatient therapies
Yeah.
and all sorts of therapies that I looked for all over the United States,
Mhm.
whether it was hyperbaric oxygen or stem cells or biomagnetism. It'll look far and wide for a lot of these different, some invasive, some non-invasive therapies.
Yeah.
Um, and when Sierra was becoming more aware of what she, where she was and started, she had to learn basically infancy all the way up to where
Yeah.
she was in her life all over again. All the things that we take for granted, she had to learn how to
Yeah.
do. Um, and basically, when she became more aware, she decided we had a ton of people reaching out from all over the
Mm.
United States and the world, wanting to support, but also wanting to share the stories about their own children or loved ones that have experienced TBIs and what they had
Yeah.
gone through. And Sierra just said, I want to help others. I want to help others who are on
Wow.
this journey, and I want to bring people back to God. And that really was her mission.
That's awesome.
So we
Does
started Unmask the Invisible.
does she remember any of anything like being in the hospital or any when she, before she was even able to speak again? Does she remember anything or
She does.
she
When
does?
she first became more aware, and like people will see her with their eyes open and say, "Oh, great, she's awake, she's better."
Yeah.
It's not, how they portray coma people
Right.
in videos and movies. That's not how it happens in real
Yeah.
life. And she did. She clearly remembered the accident. She remembered how the accident happened.
Wow.
She remembered us, that's a fear. Like, is she even going to remember who we
Right.
are? But she
Right.
clearly remembered all of her family members and her pets.
Yeah.
There were struggles in her recovery because she didn't realize that some of the people that she really loved had passed away before.
Oh,
So
wow.
the grieving process came all over
Yeah.
again for that. And then as her brain was healing, she actually, she would remember things from the past, and I think her
Yeah.
long-term memory really came back very, very strong.
That's amazing. That
Mhm.
is amazing. So, for people that have never been around someone with a TBI or have gone through what you've gone through, what are the biggest challenges people face? Is it having to learn everything over again? Is it something else that we just would not even think of?
I think in my opinion, the biggest challenges people face are, you knew this person in a particular characteristic in their life, who they were, how they felt, how they talked, what they liked, what they disliked. And I
Yeah.
think when someone goes through a brain injury, all of that landscape changes. Some
Yeah.
of it, some of her characteristics and her traits are no longer there.
Yeah.
Some have amplified. So for
Yeah.
example, if someone was afraid of something before, now they might be deathly afraid of it.
Wow.
So it's really I think the hardest thing was really getting to know, how do you interact with this person now? And how do you
Mm.
navigate through what they're feeling? Because they really are alone in this journey. I was
Sure.
Sierra's caretaker 24/7, but I
Yeah.
was going through it with her, but I was not in it with her. I was not, I didn't know what she was thinking, and
Right.
on a lot of different things. So one of our programs that we really focus on in Unmask the Invisible is reintegration. Because what
Mhm.
we saw too was that people who knew Sierra her whole life, whether it was in the community, at school, family members, really did not know how to treat her. And I think
Yeah.
if you think the analogy I use, like if someone passes away and you see, if somebody lost their mom or dad, and then you see that person, like you almost don't know the words, you don't know what to
Right.
say. So either you shut down and kind of avoid it, or um, you just try your best to dance around it. And I
Yeah.
felt like that's how people treated Sierra, is that if they didn't know what to say or how to say it or
Yeah.
what she was like, they would avoid. And it almost became like avoiding our family in some
Yeah.
respects too.
That's hard.
So I think reintegration and understanding that, these people have challenges,
Sure.
could have challenges. Some have mobility challenges, some have cognitive, most have cognitive challenges. But I
Yeah.
feel that understanding how can you help and how can you support in whatever capacity you are in their life. So if you're a provider, a teacher, a cousin, a parent, how do
Yeah.
you support this person going forward?
Yeah. That was gonna be one of my next questions is what do you offer with Unmask the Invisible? How are you helping people? So that's one of the things that you do. What else do y'all do to help people with TBIs and families?
Sure. So one of the important aspects of how the brain functions is getting blood and oxygen to the brain. And
Mhm.
sometimes people are not in a mobile place where they can go out and exercise right away,
Right.
or they just don't have the balance or the agility, or they're wheelchair bound. So one of the ways that we felt was really great to bring blood and oxygen to the brain was through art.
Oh,
So
wow.
we have a program called, the umbrella is called the Sierra Project.
Uh-huh.
And under that, we have what's called the Paint It Forward kits. So in those kits, we provide watercolors and paintbrushes and canvases and sketch pads.
Wow.
And we send these out free of charge. So you can go on our website and you can request one of these. And then when you're done, there's a paper in there that explains the program. And you can go right to our website, to our art gallery, and fill out a submission form. And we
Uh-huh.
upload your art to our art gallery. So it
Oh,
gives
that's awesome.
brain injury survivors a voice in
Sure.
through the form of art. Another program under the Sierra Project is the This Is Your Brain on Art. So we're
Wow.
starting to partner with other art studios across the
Mhm.
United States, but locally here in the Upper Valley, which is New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine,
Mhm.
we have This Is Your Brain on Art classes where we have an instructor come and we provide the canvases and the watercolors, and we do this as a group. And we
Wow.
paint step by step. Even if you have no artistic talent whatsoever, you can attend, and our teacher is fabulous. She walks you through step by
Wow.
step how to create this masterpiece, and you can see some of those on our
That's
art gallery
awesome.
as well.
That
And
is awesome.
we also, in the beginning, have started working. This was probably early in 2023. We started working with the Thayer School of Engineering at Dartmouth College here in the
Uh-huh.
Upper Valley. And we worked on creating a weighted paintbrush. So we're in the stages of patenting that now.
Wow.
But if you go online and you look for weighted paints, or I'm sorry, weighted pens and pencils, you'll find them. But
Mhm.
a lot of times people who suffer traumatic brain injuries also deal with ataxia, which is the tonality and the shakiness of their hands.
Yeah.
So by creating a paintbrush that is weighted in and has sensory items on it, it's connecting with the brain in different ways so that they can steady their lines as they're drawing, and
Wow.
actually you know paint more freely and more easily, instead of
Yeah.
trying to take a regular lightweight paintbrush where they may not have the same amount of control when they're painting.
Sure. Those are all incredible ways to help. I love that. I love when people do things through art. I've talked to a few different people that do stuff like that, and it always amazes me because it's so for somebody that loves to draw or paint or do whatever, it just feels good. And so I think that's great that y'all do that. Can you think of a really impactful story of a family or a person that was just moved by this program or helped or shared with you how much y'all have encouraged them other than your own?
Yes, there are a lot of those stories. Even to this day, I still receive stories about, Sears crash happened during the time of COVID when people were
Oh
already
yeah.
losing faith and feeling very isolated and alone. And I think following her story gave them a lot of inspiration and hope, because in the beginning, I vowed to share, for better or for worse, what the outcome of Sierra's story would be. So I think
Right.
people found comfort and inspiration. I think one of the most recent stories that I can share is we have a program called the Halo Fund,
Uh-huh.
where a lot of our fundraising is allocated to this fund to help brain injury survivors who would like to um, experience non-invasive therapies that are very helpful, but
Hmm.
it's outside the realm of their insurance covering it. So we financially subsidize the
Oh
survivor
wow.
to experience these non-invasive therapies. So there was a particular person that I met in a networking group, and I gave a presentation on Unmask the Invisible. And she had reached out to me about a month and a half later and said, I saw your presentation. It was great, but at the time I knew nobody that had a brain injury, so it
Right.
really didn't impact me in a particular way. And
Yeah.
then she went on vacation and fell off a cliff.
Oh
Or
my
I'm sorry, it was
goodness.
fell off riding a bike and hit her head.
Oh wow.
And she was reaching out to say, now I'm struggling with this. And as I'm going to the medical community for help, they're helping the acute injury, but not the long term. So I'm still
Yeah.
suffering from X, Y, and Z. What do you have to offer? And can I try some? She also had medical bills that were far beyond. This is a very, very expensive journey if
I
you
bet.
have experienced anybody with a traumatic brain injury. And she had medical bills that were piling up. So we
Yeah.
were able to give her, to fund her through the Halo Fund for
Yeah.
her medical expenses, and then soon to be some of these therapies that she would like to try. I
Wow.
had mentioned earlier too that I had to search far and wide for a lot of these different therapies. So what we did is on our website, we have a resource page and we brought
Mhm.
all these therapies together
Oh,
in
that's
one
great.
spot so that if somebody's looking and saying, oh, what is hyperbaric oxygen? What is biomagnetism? What is float therapy? So we give
Right.
you the information right there on the website, and it's a good starting place to say, wow, I wonder if this would work. Um, so we also have some other programs where we work in the community with, we're currently working on some future retreats, but we work in the community with some community nurses who may not be adept in treating someone with a TBI when they're going in for their home care. Um,
Right.
yep. And we also have a support group called the Hope Cafe.
Mhm.
And the Hope Cafe is really the name came from the different support groups that Sierra and I attended really focused on the survivor and the caregiver. We
Right.
really wanted to open it up to everyone, including the siblings who are,
Yeah.
Sierra has four siblings, and this was extremely hard. And there's very little
Yes.
acknowledgement and support for siblings. I looked far and wide for support groups for them, and there were really none. So we wanted to make this an all-inclusive support group to help everyone who was
Sure.
coming to the table saying, what can I learn and what do I need to know about what this person's going through and how can I help and support?
Yeah. You are just a wealth of information for people. I love this. This is great. So what advice would you give to a family that is just stepping into this journey? I mean, I know it's not a quick fix. I know it's not, you don't have the perfect words to make it all better. What advice could you give them on the very beginning as they're beginning this?
Yeah, I think I just had a family reach out a couple of weeks ago. It's a local family here who's their son's a senior in high school,
Hmm.
and he fell off an ATV and suffered a traumatic brain injury and some
Wow.
other injuries. And I think just acknowledging where people are at in their journey,
Hmm.
that it will be a long journey,
Yeah.
that I think the greatest resource is prayer
Yeah.
and support from not only people who have gone through it, but people who just want to be there for that person and that family.
Yeah.
And I think that equipping parents or loved ones who are going through this initially with the knowledge that ask questions, like if you don't
Yeah.
understand something that the doctor's telling you, ask questions and make sure that you're reaching out. There were a ton of questions that I had, but you're so overwhelmed with grief
Right.
in the beginning and you're so exhausted emotionally
Yeah.
that you're not thinking about the next steps and what really needs to happen and who's taking care of maybe your family at home or providing
Right.
meals or transportation. And it's just so overwhelming. So I think helping with resources to support the families that are initially going through this, like, what do you need? Are there social workers at the hospital that are helping you? Are the
Right.
doctors explaining things as you see fit? There's certain age groups, like if you're dealing more with an older teenager or a young adult, that may qualify for SSI in their state, or just like arming
Sure.
them with as much information, especially about the state it's happening in.
Yeah.
Right now, there's only 32 of the 50 states that have any state level funding for brain injury
Wow.
survivors, and that may be cut down as well. So I think just being a resource and
Hmm.
being knowing how overwhelming it is, but being that listening person to, like, what can I do for you and how can we help support?
Yeah. I spoke with a man recently who was diagnosed with cancer, and he talked a little bit about what you said earlier, how people don't know how to react or they don't know what to say. And he said, you just start the conversation with, I don't know what to say, but I want to help. I mean, just be honest and real. I don't know how to help, but what can I do? Please tell me what I can do. So tell me about Sierra now. How is Sierra doing now?
Sierra now is in a really, really great place.
That's awesome.
She has healed physically, completely healed
Wow.
physically, as well as um, 6 weeks after her, so if I can just back up and you'll have to edit
Sure.
it, but when we first arrived at the emergency room, and the neurologist that came out brought up a brain scan of Sierra, and it showed just her brain was shredded. At the time, her car
Wow.
was going 80, came to a complete stop by hitting an oak tree, but her brain kept
Mm,
going in her skull, and it just moved all around and shredded. So there were so many damaged areas of her brain.
yeah.
It was really hard to comprehend. But in right before Thanksgiving, we went and they did another MRI of her brain. And when they brought up the image, the doctor was just dumbfounded. She didn't know what to say
Wow.
because Sierra's brain had almost completely healed.
Wow.
And this is something we had asked of God, and
Yeah.
miracles are still happening.
Oh,
And
sure.
that's really important.
Yes.
So while she'll always have some cognitive challenges, like, but again, we try to sit there and differentiate, is this because, she walked in the room, forgot what she was there for, like we
Right.
all do,
I do
or is
that.
this from the brain injury? So we have a
Right.
hard time kind of disseminating the both of
Yeah.
when something like that happens. But Sierra she finished high school. She got her degree. She went to college. Um,
Wow.
she works part-time. She drives a vehicle. She's very, very interactive in our organization and
That's
really
awesome.
being the ambassador and talking to people. She likes the more one-on-one. She's kind of
Yeah.
introverted, so she's not really great in front of the big crowds just yet.
Yeah.
But we're hoping that's where she'll go with this message, and the message of hope and inspiration for others. In December of 23, uh, Sierra and I, along with a ghostwriter, had worked on a book about her story. We had a lot of
Wow.
people approach us in her
Yeah.
journey and said, you have just got to write a book about this. This is just
Sure.
amazing. So we did release that book in December of 23. It's also called Unmask the Invisible, and it's available
That's
on
awesome.
Amazon.
Okay. That's awesome. I love it. I love that she's so active and wants to help and encourage people after going through this. How can people support Unmask the Invisible? What can they do besides pray? What can they do?
Absolutely. I would just encourage to, if anybody would like to help, I would just encourage them to visit our website at www.unmasktheinvisible.org. There
Okay.
are many ways you can help through um, support, through volunteering, whether it's near or you're far away. We will take volunteers as
Yeah.
they come, and also through spreading the word. I think that's most important of the work that we're doing and we're trying to do, and making it available and known to others. Encouraging people to apply for the Halo Fund and join our
Sure.
programs, reach out to us. Also donate if you can, if you have the means to do that, to donate financially to support some of these programs.
Yeah.
And I think you'll find that, all the answers on the website.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Is there
Thank
anything I didn't
you.
ask you about that you want to tell me about?
I don't think so at this time. I really appreciate your time and
Sure.
making this happen so quickly after we just met at the conference.
Yeah,
And definitely, I appreciate your willingness to learn more about our organization and how we're trying to help others
absolutely.
and make a difference in the world.
It's important. It's important. And I love learning about people who are helping other people. It always just amazes me to see what, because you don't hear about it on the news. You don't hear about the good things that are happening everywhere. So I love
Yes,
being able to share that. So, well, I
yes.
appreciate you
Awesome.
talking to me and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.